Hello, welcome everyone to Clarity, the Essence of Lean Management webinar. My name is Karen Martin, and what we're going to do today is just do a bit of an intro into clarity. Sounds like a simple topic, but I wrote a book called Clarity First, and I learned that it wasn't so simple. Not at all, actually. And I'd like to share with you a little bit about how I discovered that when you look at the whole body of what makes lean management a very robust management system, how clarity plays a role in that. So before I get going, to make sure all of our technology is working, I'd love for you to go to your control panel and just click the hand raising icon so that I can make sure you can hear me, you can see me, sounds good, we're okay to go. Could you please do that? All right, yay. Now you know how to raise your hand when we get to the Q&A section. If you want me to unmute you, you can ask a question audibly, or you can type it into the question and answer area in the control panel. So we'll allow about 10 minutes for questions at the end. So now I'm going to put everyone's hand down. Okay, good to go. Thank you. All right, let's dive into it. So where did this whole interest of mine come, in clarity? So one of the things that I've noticed, as I've been, from a little kid all the way up to adulthood and beyond, I have always been really interested in truth. What is the truth? How do we know it's the truth? Does truth vary from person to person? And it's just been a side interest of mine, and a passion of mine all along. As I started writing books about operational excellence and continuous improvement, business performance improvement, and all the work that I've done over decades now of being in this work, I started realizing that clarity really was the essence of what I was thinking about in terms of truth. So I wrote this book called The Outstanding Organization many years ago. And the premise is that there were these 4 conditions or behaviors that I found that all entities that were delivering high quality and excellence were present all the time. And they were clarity, focus, discipline, and engagement. And I studied everything from business to athletes, musicians, military establishments, and saw that these same 4 conditions were always present. And they seemed to spend a lot of time honing each one of those 4 areas. So I released the book, and I started getting all this feedback from people about the book, positive feedback mostly. And there was one gentleman that I had actually worked with at a client location, and he was a guy that was, kind of not one to show emotion much, not at all. He was kind of a hard to read guy. And he said that while he was reading The Outstanding Organization, when the clarity chapter in particular, that he just started feeling really sad and anxious, and he eventually teared up a little bit in reading that chapter. And it was because he started realizing that the stress that he had been feeling, the lack of satisfaction he was feeling, the discomfort with the work environment he was feeling, all centered around the lack of clarity and living in this world of full ambiguity. And it made him, it was a very life-changing discovery for him. So he was one of many that went on and on about the clarity chapter. And I thought, I'm going to go more deeply into this. So I thought a single subject would be very interesting and easy. And I started realizing that clarity is not something that a lot of people are comfortable with. And it's not an element of being that organizations are all that comfortable with. And then I started tying the connection between lean management and what makes lean management be rejected by so many organizations and what makes it successful in so many organizations. And I realized that in large part, it was an organization's appetite for clarity, a leader's appetite for clarity, a frontline person's appetite for clarity. And that's when, I got really excited about this topic. So when I started getting excited about the topic and I got my book deal with McGraw-Hill, I started seeing the lack of clarity everywhere. It's like deciding to buy a white car, and now every car on the highway is a white car. And this was a real situation. I had lived in San Diego, California, was moving back to Santa Monica for my second round in Santa Monica, California. Finally got all my boxes unpacked, was exhausted, finally decided to go to the grocery store. And I was circling and circling and circling for a parking place. And I finally saw an opening and I started to pull in, and then I saw these series of signs, and I was double parked, and there were horns honking behind me, and so I, tried to scoot in a little bit, but I'm reading the signs trying to figure out, can I park here? And it just was taking so much effort for me to figure out if I could just park there. It was a simple decision. And then I started thinking about all the organizations we've worked with as a consulting firm over the years and individual leaders I've coached over the years. And I realized at that moment, like, wow, this lack of clarity takes a lot of organizational effort. Effort costs money. Effort creates lack of job satisfaction. Effort creates, in some cases, errors, depending on how the effort is doing. Effort can create a lot of excess effort, can create customer service problems. So there's all this extra effort in the presence of ambiguity, which is the opposite of clarity. And it just was, I started seeing it everywhere. So part of my goal today is to just sensitize you to where clarity is and where it is not, and start getting really clear about the degree to which you are not operating within the presence of clarity, and possibly not delivering clarity in your communications and things like that. So ambiguity, the opposite of clarity, complicates everything. It slows everything down. It creates a lot of frustration, and is expensive. The clients we work with that have a lot of ambiguity, when we walk in there, you can tell that their payroll costs are quite a bit higher than they would otherwise need to be, because they have to hire all these additional people just to, muddle through the fog and get the day's work done. And so part of what lean management brings to the table are lots of great practices and management systems that help you clear that fog and be able to run more efficiently and effectively. And when you're running efficiently and effectively, the work is more fun. And I'm all about fun. I'm all about serious work as well. But we have to have joy in what we're doing, or it's just a pain and it's a drag, and who wants to do it? So joy should be present, at work. Now, take a quick glance at your monitor. Don't think fast and don't look all over the place. How many dots do you see at a glance? Some of you that are looking at small monitors will be able to see more than others that are looking. I have a 27-inch monitor I'm looking at right now. So how many dots do you see? Some of you may see 2. Some of you may see 4. The reason why is this is an intentional optical illusion created by Akiyoshi. I'll show you his name in just a minute. A wonderful Japanese illusionist. And this grid work that you see, this lattice work, is making it difficult to see what's really there. And this is the equivalent of the organizational ambiguity that you have at department levels, team lead levels, division levels, business unit levels, corporate levels. You name your level of granularity, and I will guarantee you that there's at least some degree of ambiguity that you need to get rid of in order to achieve high performance. So take the lattice work away, bam, 12 dots. Easy to see. So that's your analogy to think about going forward about what that ambiguity is doing. So you can't even see the truth for all the ambiguity that you have to muddle through. Now, Akiyoshi Kitaoka is the guy behind it. I don't know. Some people said that this is cutting off. It's Akiyoshi, and the last name Kitaoka, Kitaoka. He's pretty big on social media, and I love his posts. He has the most fascinating illusions that I've ever seen. So I encourage you to look him up. Also, you will be sent the slides after the webinar. I wanted you to just kind of be with the content and not have them necessarily in advance, but we will send them out to you. So what is clarity? Yes, it's the opposite of ambiguity, but how do we actually define clarity? How do we know if we're in the presence of clarity? Well, there's 3 elements or 3 traits that clarity has in my worldview. One is coherence. So this is like the stickiness, like things stick together. You don't have a reaction of like, wait, what? You're not getting that. It's like this really crisp, clear, it's sticking together. Everything seems to make sense. Then there's precision. And by precision, I mean, that you don't have to guess at what the meaning is. The meaning is intended right up front. And I'm not talking just about email communication and verbal conversations. I'm talking about everything, every form of information. I mean, all we do all day long is transfer information back and forth. So this is any level of information. So precision would be an example of someone would say, well, that's a lot. We're doing that a lot. Well, what's a lot? A lot might mean 4 times a week to someone. It may mean 4 times an hour to someone. You want to get crisp with your communication and talking and thinking, frankly. You want to get very precise in your thinking about what it is and get more specific, more precise in what you actually mean. And then elegance. Elegance when it's just easy. You understand it. You don't have to go, what was that? Wait, I thought he said, wait, there's that kind of questioning that happens when you're not in the presence of elegance. So coherence, precision, and elegance are the keys to being able to operate within an environment of clarity and delivering clearly. Now, there are 3 clarity types, and you're not only one type. So I'll explain that in just a minute, but let's go through the 3 types. So on the one end of the spectrum, the goal for you, I hope, is a clarity pursuer. So this is someone that just is a dog going after a bone for clarity. This is someone that when they get an unclear answer, won't rest with that unclear answer and will ask clarifying questions so that they are clear. The danger we see as a firm a lot in this one is that people will take on a project not really understanding what the intended outcomes are supposed to be, what the person meant by it, what problem they were trying to solve, all of those things that really can trip us up. So asking for clarity is not only a noble thing to do, it's actually a responsible thing to do. And a lot of folks in the workplace aren't used to that. They may have either been kind of punished for asking for clarity in the past, or they may, be experiencing some criticism in the present state. And so you have to create the environment where people will feel comfortable asking for clarity. The opposite end of it is this clarity avoider. And this clarity avoider varies quite a bit from something that's okay some of the time to something that's really not okay ever. And what I mean by that is this type 2 strategic ambiguity in the world of corporate America and big business and government for that matter. There are times when it is wise and prudent to be a little ambiguous. And for example, let's say that you're entertaining a possible acquisition, or someone's entertaining an acquisition of your part of the company, or a spinoff, or some kind of new product development. It's usually very, very tight-lipped on new product development. Things like that, you can't necessarily just lead with clarity, or you might hurt yourself in the marketplace. So being very careful to limit the use of strategic ambiguity is a responsible thing to do, but there are times to use it. The worst thing you can do is intentional deceit. And intentional deceit, especially to harm someone, is just unacceptable. It's sociopathic, and it's definitely not what you want to see. And hopefully there's not a whole lot of that going on. If it is going on in your organization or you're part of the organization, it really needs to be dealt with. So definitely, keep an eye out for intentional deceit and get to the root cause of why that person or those people are operating that way. Will for ignorance is the other category. This would be something where it's like, la, 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 I don't want to know. And leaders do get into this a lot, where it's just, there's so much to do. There's so many projects. There's so much stress that they'll be just like, I can't take anything more. But that creates a poor performing operation because it trains people not to surface problems and not to tell the truth and all those things. So you have to find a different way to manage all the pressures, to find the space to allow the information to flow that needs to flow. One of these, and it's out of scope for this webinar, one of these is just getting very, very clear on organizational priorities and doing fewer things at once. And there's a whole discipline process that will help you do that. And that will allow you the space to allow people to give you that information that you don't have to go, la, 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 I don't want to know. Clarity blind is, another category, and that's either people are not sensitized to the need for it. So hopefully after today, nobody will be clarity blind in that area, or you're aware of it, but maybe have a little difficulty perceiving it. And one of the ways to increase our ability to perceive the lack of clarity, to feel the ambiguity, is to, I just said it, feel it. You can feel when you're in the presence of clarity, and you can feel when you're in the presence of ambiguity. And the more you become present and can be able to sense immediately, is it clear? Is it not clear? The more you can ask for clarity, and then the more you become habituated to delivering everything with greater clarity. Now, what is needed to operate in this clear environment we're trying to set up is a healthy dose of humility and a really healthy dose of curiosity. So humility is important because if we think we know and we don't, then we're deluding ourselves, and it's just adding to the ambiguous environment that maybe already exists. Curiosity is a tricky one, a real tricky one. I didn't know this until I started working on this book and discovered all these crazy elements that make us not curious as adults. So if you're curious, if you're hardwired as a curious being, I guarantee you had some really good parents, some really good bosses, and some really good teachers to help foster that. A lot of us weren't so lucky and have to rekindle or reignite the curiosity that all people are born with. Here's what I mean. When you're born, you take any little kid, your own kids, neighbors' kids, your nieces, your nephews, your whatever it might be. What is the most common question every kid asks? Why? Why, mommy? Why, daddy? Why? Second most common question, why not? Why can't I do that? Why not? So why is hardwired into all sentient beings. And what happens is we get desensitized to it, and it gets somewhat drummed out of us by otherwise well-meaning parents who are harried and stressed and tired, and they can't take another why question. So they say, oh, stop the why questions, stop the questions. Teachers that do the same, bosses that do the same. There's where I came in. So I was born a curious being, just like you all were. And I had my first corporate boss was a pretty forceful woman, and I learned a lot from her. However, there was a time in my first performance review where she said, you know, Karen Martin, you have a high need to know. And it was finger wagging. It was judgment. It was definitely not a good thing that I had a high need to know in her mind. And it affected me, and I stopped asking questions for a while. And it took me years, maybe even a couple decades, to understand what that one, it wasn't just that one conversation, it was actually the way she operated, the way she led. She didn't want to be held to having to answer any questions about anything. And so it was a very irresponsible leadership behavior. But boy, did it shape me. And so a lot of people in your organization, you yourselves may have been shaped by this kind of thinking that curiosity is not safe. Then we add to it society and what society does with curiosity. Lovely. Here's, this is how it feels when you're not able to be a human being, which curiosity is being a human being. It sucks. It stinks. It doesn't feel good. So, we adapt, and adapting in this case isn't good. So society sends these horrible messages to us. What is this representing? The saying, curiosity killed the cat. That doesn't sound too good. I don't think, curiosity, it's a subtle message, but it's out there, and it does, it plays in the back of our minds, even if we don't fully embrace it directly. Then we have Curious George. Lovely Curious George got himself into trouble when he was curious. What happened? He had to get rescued by the man in the yellow hat. So, that curiosity doesn't seem very, very wise there either. And it goes on. There are many, many situations and examples of where curiosity has a bad rap in society, in movies, in television, in books, and things like that. So it is pervasive. So we have to rise up and forget all that and break away from all that societal programming and become curious beings again. That's the only way to operate in an environment of clarity and to deliver clarity. So what gets in our way, in addition to all that kind of social programming and drumming out curiosity, are cognitive biases. Biases are not bad if you're aware of them. They actually help kind of put framework around concepts and allow us to succeed in life. But we have to be aware when we're operating with one, and be able to go beyond that bias and gather more information in order to be able to be clear about what's going on. So there's been about 180 now that have been identified, and that's a lot of bias. And then the related thing are assumptions. So what does this say? I bet quite a few of you said jumping to conclusions, right? We're filling in the gaps with what we already know. But that's not what it said. So assumptions are very, very common. They're very dangerous. Their biases are easier to become aware of than assumptions are. Assumptions come from actually a little bit of a place of arrogance. It's a funny little way of thinking about arrogance, but it's like you think you know, but you don't. You think you're filling in the gaps, but you don't have the facts. So part of what lean management practices do is there's this relentless emphasis on developing people to become scientific problem solvers by going after the facts, and don't even start solving a problem until you're very clear on what it is and the reasons why it exists. True root cause analysis. The other thing that gets in our way of operating with clarity, I've already kind of hinted about it. I didn't say the F word. And what I mean is fear. So organizational fear is in the way much of the time when you see people not operating with clarity. And it is a force to be reckoned with. W. Edwards Deming, the father of the total quality management movement, said it so well. His number one kind of rule of thumb in working with organizations of all sorts is banish fear from the workplace. And it's really important. You'll never operate in a clear environment if fear is pervasive. And it can spread fast. Fear spreads very, very fast. So how do we think about lean management more specifically when it comes to clarity? Well, I broke up the whole body of lean management systems into 5 Ps: purpose, priorities, process, performance, and problem solving. And I'd love to share with you just a little bit. I mean, a book takes about 8 hours to read, so this is a 1-hour webinar. So this is just the highlights of some of that stuff. And it's some actionable things that you can take away right away after this webinar and start using. So the first is purpose. I mentioned a bit ago about prioritization. It's really difficult as an organization to prioritize appropriately if you don't have a clear purpose. And many people believe they know what the purpose is and don't. And so I recommend everyone take an explicit time out to think about what the purpose is really. Really, what is the purpose? Why was it formed as a company? What problem is it solving? Why that problem and not another problem? Getting to the founders of an organization, if they're still alive, is often the fastest way to get clear on purpose, because over the years, purpose can become very muddled and very, very fuzzy in an organization, and getting back to the roots of why an organization formed is often very, very healthy and transformative on multiple levels. So why you do what you do is what purpose is. Not what you do. That's easy to say what you do, but why you do it and why you do that versus something else is critical to understand. The way you do this is you start first with the easy question, what do you do? So, you do lots of things, but it's easy to answer those questions depending on where you sit in the company. What do you really do gets a little tougher to answer. And that means what problem or problems are you solving for your customers? And you have various customer groups. So what do you really do? And then finally, why do you do it? That is the hardest question to answer. That is your purpose. And it's there. You just have to mine for it. You don't have to make it up. You don't have to create a purpose. It's already there. But mining for it can be challenging at times. Now let's move to priorities. Once you know and once you're clear on that purpose, prioritization becomes a whole lot easier. And so priorities become, a matter of taking all that you could do, all the great ideas that exist out there, all the problems you could solve, all the internal, drama that you could make go away, and figure out what you're going to work on first, second, third, one at a time, maybe 3 at a time if they're big projects, but certainly not 20 at a time. And the reason why you don't want to do that is because you insert a lot of task switching back and forth when you do too much at once. And that's productive loss right there. I mean, just mental ramp up to move from one thing to the other thing is a huge time loss. And so if you do fewer things at once, I'll show you in a minute, I guarantee you'll get a whole lot more done in the same unit of time than if you try to juggle too much. Multitasking, cognitive tasks does not exist. It's not possible. And we think that multitasking is what we're doing when in fact we're task switching. So David Meyer, University of Michigan, was the first to make this, into a popular idea that there's no such thing as multitasking. Hopefully none of your job descriptions there say, must be able to multitask, because you do not want people to think that they're able to do something that's impossible to do for cognitive tasks. You want people to actually be geniuses at focus and discipline and prioritization. Strategy deployment is the English version of a concept that the Japanese have great success with, Toyota in particular, which is a little bit of the father of the lean management movement. Strategy deployment is Hoshin Kanri in Japanese, and it just means basically, true north, a plan toward true north. And so what's important about it is it gives you this very clear and focused and very disciplined way, and it's also very engaging, to be able to get measurable performance goals, like really significant performance goals, not just a little bit of improvement, but a lot of improvement over a short period of time, usually a fiscal year. And it allows the organization to realize whatever your strategy is. So this does require you to have a strategy that will help fulfill your purpose. And it gets you to the point where you are able to stick to the purpose and not deviate. So part of that mining for purpose happens when things get unclear and we've kind of morphed into, well, let's create that problem because we have the expertise, let's do it, even if it's not really aligned to purpose. So that happens a lot in organizations, and it's not healthy. So 2 things you can do today, this evening, is you can stop doing some things that you don't have to do. And we all do things that we don't have to do that frees up time. We all have them. So starting to get serious about it. It's early in the year. I don't think it's a New Year's resolution now, but it can be a goal that you just make a choice, think hard, and find some things that you can stop doing. And then the law number 2 is do fewer things at once. So instead of juggling, don't juggle so much. Get one thing done, and then the next thing done, and then the next thing done, and move on. Here's what you can get if you do this. You can get, this is a client that was just running amok, I call it, no focus. And they got 24 significant projects done. This happened to be product development over the course of a fiscal year. Pretty big product development projects. So it was impressive. 24 is really impressive. With no additional resources. There was a little additional capital because they had to buy some equipment, but no additional resources. They were able to get 73 of similar complexity products developed in the same time period. And everyone reported that the stress went down, the quality went up, the joy went up. And so this focus thing of doing fewer things at once is a really big deal. And getting clear on the priorities is the way that you can achieve this. Next, process. So process is, of all of these, believe it or not, is the trickiest one, and it seems like it should be the easiest one. So here it is, 2021. We've been at business for a long time. We've been at industry since the Industrial Revolution, a long time. And yet when we walk into clients, and I'll bet you any money there's a fair amount of it there is hardly anything that's truly documented, current, managed, measured in terms of process. And if you're not clear on what the work is, there's just a whole lot of muck that comes out of that. And so part of what lean management brings to the table is this, this practice of work standardization. And people often go like, standardize, you're going to take the art out of what we do. It doesn't. Over standardization is as bad as under standardization. So you don't want to over standardize. And where variation needs to exist, standardize the variation that needs to exist. And so you make smart decisions about what variation is natural, normal, necessary, and what variation you don't have to have. And it is a productivity sapper, it's a quality eroder, all those things. And so process is critical to get very clear on. And One of the things that we recommend is it's a lean management practice, and it's probably the most powerful new practice I've learned when I moved from the total quality management way of thinking to lean management. Now it's been 20 years since I learned lean management, is value stream thinking and value stream management, performance and value stream organization. It is so powerful to be able to look at a really complex work system where work is flowing over multiple departments. It takes a long time to get through. This is not a process look. This is a high level look at a value stream, like a freeway, like a helicopter hovering over a freeway system, able to see where work flows and doesn't flow, and creating a strategic roadmap to improvement before you start getting into the weeds of improvement is a really important way to get leadership aligned. So you don't have people starting to make improvement and then a leader says, whoa, 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 what are we doing here? No, I didn't authorize that. You get leadership aligned first on strategy in terms of improvement. Then the baton gets passed to the front lines and they can actually get really good improvement done because they're the work experts. They're the ones doing the work really quickly because there's nothing in the way. And proper prioritization also prevails. So very, very powerful to distill a complex work system down to a single sheet of paper. And this is only the current state. Then there's a future state design that includes the strategic components of what you're going to do to change the value stream and make it more effective. So the other thing that's critical about the clarity you get from doing value stream work is on the IT system side of things. We are computer based, like no other year. Work gets more and more computer based as time goes on. Well, you can't see the work when it's in a computer. So you need this to be able to see how information flows or doesn't flow from area to area, process to process, team to team. And this was a case of a company that the middle level of leaders, I'd say director level primarily, maybe some associate vice presidents, had been really trying to get budget approved for 3 years to get some integration systems in place so that some of their systems would talk to each other. Notice this one, it's blurred by intention because I don't want you to be able to read all the stuff here. But this happens to be an Excel block, and this is an Excel used to calculate things. This is Excel used as a database and a workflow management tool. So there's a whole lot of Excel going on because the system wouldn't allow them to do it otherwise. And none of these systems talk together except for Navisworks and AutoCAD. This is a design area. And so, this is when the CTO walked up into this, Chief Technology Officer, walked into a briefing at the end of the current state mapping, his mouth dropped open. They had budget approved 4 days later for the things they had been asking for 3 days, for 3 years, sorry. So it's pretty powerful stuff to be able to see the truth and have clarity. So standard work at a process level is different from the old days of SOPs, standard operating procedures, P&Ps, policy and procedures, or any of those names. It's very succinct, crisp, clear, visual, and guess who creates it? The people who do the work. No supervisors, they may oversee it, but it's the people who do the work and it's a whole process for vetting this to make sure that there are no gaping holes. And this is the most powerful thing you can do when it comes to onboarding new hires. Your learning curves are much shorter. They're ramped up to full productivity much, much more quickly when you do this. It takes time to create the first ones if you don't have them, but it's, you're investing in years and years of having clarity and not having people have to do rework and all the things that happen when processes are not well designed or nor well managed. And then making problems visible. So this takes a fearless operation, pretty much, to make this happen. But all of the work that we do, we need to be able to see more quickly when there's a problem. And so it's being innovative and thinking about process design and what could we do that would allow us to know that something's not right? How could we make that, easier, earlier in the process to detect so we can do something about it? And that is a huge part of the lean management system from a principle or a tenet perspective is you want to surface problems the minute they occur so that they don't fester. Performance. This is a good one. So imagine you go to the sport of your choice, you name it, and there's a scoreboard and it's blank and you have no idea what the score is. It takes a lot of effort to figure out what's going on. You've got to figure out who's got the ball, whatever ball it is, or if it's a bat or whatever. Like, wait, who's in the lead here? And then you have to watch for a while to figure out who actually is in the lead. And you may never know who's in the lead, but just by watching, it's because it's history and it's not on the board. And so what we need to be doing in every single work area needs to have their version of a performance board. How do we know how we're doing? How do we know if we're doing well? How do we know if we're not doing well? Are we on target? Are we off target? There's so much ambiguity around this in most organizations, and it just drags you down. To not know how you're doing is a terrible way to live. You walk in the door not knowing, are we winning? Are we losing? Like, where are we? And so, and of course, depending on where you are in the organization, the metrics that you use to say how you're doing differ. It's a dashboard. You need dashboards everywhere. So this is an executive level dashboard for a medical device manufacturer. And, they have, I think, they have 8? Yeah, they have 8 metrics here. We recommend no more than 9. And you have to choose wisely. What most reflects the health of the organization. Or if you're a department manager or a business unit leader, what matters to your part of the organization. And if you're, frontline supervisor with a work team or a team lead, what matters to your team? How do you know if you're doing well? How do you know if you're off target? Got to have clarity on this. Daily management systems, abbreviated DMS, are wonderful. It's not something we actually lead with. We often wait until an organization has a more maturity around problem solving, around using metrics to measure performance, and has comfort around that before we get too far down the pipe with daily management. But it's a standard way that you start every day or every shift, and knowing whether or not you're on target, off target, what's being done about it, do we have what we need, how do we adapt, how do we adjust, what are we doing today, those kinds of things. And our huddle is actually immediately following this webinar. We have them every morning at 10:30. Then we have problem solving. So I love problem solving. I think that it's the greatest skill you can teach someone. It's the greatest gift you can give someone to help develop them into a better problem solver, because it works outside of business as well. I mean, all we do is solve problems all day long, really. I mean, all you do is really close gaps. And that's what a problem is, a gap between where you are and where you'd like to be. And so if you're striving for something, that's a gap. If you're trying to correct something, that's a gap. If customers want something different, that's a gap. Everything's a gap to be closed. So what I did was I realized that the Deming, there was a lot of emphasis on PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, Act, or PDSA, its cousin, Plan, Do, Study, Adjust, as a scientific problem-solving methodology. And this is in the 80s. It got pretty popular into the 90s. And so I grew up with this, and yet I, clarity seeker, always knew that I knew what P stood for because I studied it really intensely, but hardly anyone else knew what Plan, stood for. Plan sounds like, okay, problem, let's fix it. We're going to do this. Let's make a plan. That's what it sounds like. And that's not at all what P stands for. So after working with clients for decades on this and seeing the struggle that they had in understanding what do you actually do when you're doing scientific problem solving, I came up with a questions-based model that I call CLEAR, so you're getting clarity, and I mapped it to PDSA or PDCA. You can map it also for those of you who are DMAIC, Six Sigma folks, define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. You can map it to that. It doesn't matter what methodology you use as long as you actually answer the questions. And there are different reasons for each question being asked. It's not all just in service of a result. It may be in service of selling the need to solve the problem to the organization. So there's a lot more I could talk about with this, but there is in your control panel, I did upload the CLEAR problem solving a card that it's a PDF of a card that you can print out that if you want to start experimenting with this and see how much better your problem solving is, I would love to hear your results. It's most of the time people do much better with this. A3 reports are visual storyboards that reflect the problem-solving process. They're used for other purposes as well, but the most common use of them is for problem solving. And it's a way to develop problem-solving skills. It's a coached methodology. So there's a problem solver and a coach, and then there's a supporting cast, a team that might be working with the problem solver, but it's typically a coached activity to help problem solvers learn a whole lot of things. It's not just getting the problem solved. It's all of the potential root cause analysis methods that they could use depending on what the problem is that they're trying to solve. It's all of the potential countermeasures or solutions. We don't use solutions because that implies a sense of permanence, which isn't real. We use the term countermeasure. So all the potential countermeasures that could be used to solve a problem. It's also teaching a lot of other like sidebar skills that are really powerful in business and in life. One is distillation and synthesis. So a lot of times, middle level leaders especially fail quite a bit in their communication styles with executives because they go on and on and on and don't know how to take complex information and go bottom line it, like very succinctly say, here's the bottom line, here's what this is about. And then maybe you have supporting information that's after the fact that you provide. But a lot of middle managers don't get what they want because they don't know how to distill and synthesize. And this problem solving method where you have a coach and you're constrained to this A3 size paper, 11 by 17 in US standards, constraining that space to take all the information that's being discovered in problem solving and learning how to put the most essential elements on a single sheet of paper is a huge development plus and gain for people. So that's another purpose of this A3 report. And then finally, it's used to tell the problem solving story as it's progressing to help align people, get consensus that this is the direction to go in. I just had a guy yesterday from a client call me and say, hey, I just heard that Chrissy's working on blah, 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 and I don't think that's the problem to be solved. And they're having an A3 report out, I think it's tomorrow. And so Chrissy hadn't reported out, he just heard it through the grapevine, he would have heard it tomorrow. But she, focused in on an area of a problem to solve that this guy doesn't believe is a problem. And so that this will become a very good tool for them to be able to have a visual conversation about the data that she's discovered. And I don't know how it's going to turn out. I think she's on the right track. I think he just doesn't understand the facts. And once she conveys those to him, and if he feels like the data is robust, then I think he'll be like, oh, didn't know that was a problem. Go girl, go ahead and fix that. So that's a really powerful tool to learn how to problem solve and use this A3 report to reflect the problem solving real time. And finally, there is the concept in lean management that is so clarifying called go to the Gemba. So instead of operating with our eyes kind of closed, it is a matter of going to where the work is done. Gemba, G-E-M-B-A, also spelled sometimes G-E-N-B-A, Genba. And it's being able to just literally go, where's my go and see? Oh, I guess it's gone. Well, Gemba means go and see. And so it's opening our eyes to the truth of a situation and going and not sitting on a Zoom session or in a meeting and seeing what's actually going on. So how does this affect you? Everyone needs to think about this and think about, to what degree do I want clarity? I think that's the first question. Do you want to operate with it or not? Do you believe that the truth, no matter how hard it is to hear, is better than not knowing the truth? Do you believe that seeing, clearly what the facts are of a situation is better than not seeing it? That I think it's a fundamental question to ask. Then I think it's a matter of deciding, how do you want to deliver? Do you want to deliver clearly? Do you want your teams to know, crisply and easily what exactly you would like them to do? Do you want them to guess and possibly be wrong? There's all of those things that are important in making a personal decision what to do. And then I think you need to make an organizational decision what you want to do. Maybe it's not the whole corporate entity. Maybe it's a business unit. Maybe it's a department. Maybe it's a work team. You make a decision that you want to operate a new way. Intent is 90% of it. And intent in life is 90% of everything. And so making an intentional decision to operate with a culture of clarity is something that you could do. And, sometimes just by focusing on something, things just start happening, the Hawthorne effect. And so it's a very important thing to do. At the very least, no matter how you feel about clarity, no matter if it scares the heck out of you or you're excited by it, energized by it, at the very least, adopt a practice of a clarity pause. It can be an organizational clarity pause. It can be an individual clarity pause before you click send, before you pick up the phone, before you speak. Just pausing to make sure that you're being as clear as you can be and want to be in conveying whatever information it is. So it's pretty exciting, I think. Again, you have to be one of those people that isn't totally afraid of hearing the truth if it's difficult. That helps a lot, but it's a pretty liberating thing. So lean management is a lot more than what people think on the surface. It's not just process design. It's not just getting people at the front lines giving good ideas. It's not just strategy deployment. It's not just value stream management. It's a whole lot. But clarity is at the core of all of it. And so to succeed with lean management, you have to be interested in clarity, maybe a little obsessed with clarity. So with that overview, I would love to entertain your questions. And please remember, you can either raise your hand and I'll unmute you, or you can type your questions into the question box. And I'm a little bit of the wizard behind the screen here. So I am ready to entertain any questions you have. Feel free to connect with me through social media. You can email me. Feel free to take a look at books. We do have an academy now, and we have some online learning courses that you could check out. And we have videos all over the place. YouTube, our website, tkmg.com. Where else are the videos? YouTube, Vimeo. We have videos all over Vimeo. So just do some Googling. You'll find anything you need, I think. All right. Well, maybe we have reached our final moment. I want to just thank you again. I just hope you experiment. Just experiment. Try some of these things and see what it does for you. And I just really feel like it seems so like, duh, of course clarity matters, but it's not all that common, and it's not all that intuitive what you actually need to do in order to achieve it. So try some of these things and see what it does for you. I studied the Blue Angels, and I actually profiled them, the last chapter of The Outstanding Organization, as just one of the most premier outstanding organizations, Blue Angels being the performance flyers for the Navy. And I just love that organization. They know excellence like no other, and they know precision like no other, and they know error proofing like no other. And I love studying other things outside of the norm of business to see what we can adopt in business. And Blue Angels and all those other precision teams like that are worth taking a look at. So thank you so much for your time. Have a great evening for those of you where it's kind of late. Great day for those of you who are still in your daytime, and hope to see you again sometime. Thank you. Bye-bye.